The Perry Mansion, located in the suburbs, was an impressive place. A century-old building, always maintained in the same family, one of the wealthiest and most powerful in the region, still had a flawless appearance, unlike other similar houses that, despite retaining some grandeur, were indelibly marked by age and lack of maintenance. They drove through the gates, traveling a good distance before reaching the house along a narrow road lined with low hedges and flanked by trees. Above the hedges, one could see vast lawns dotted with flower beds that, even at night, suggested they had been planted in such a way that their colors formed patterns. There were also small fountains, all made of marble, featuring statues from which streams of water flowed. They parked in a spacious area in front of the mansion, where several luxury cars were already parked, predominantly high-end BMWs and Mercedes, but also some exotic cars like Lamborghinis and Ferraris. It was obvious, just by the parked cars, the type of people who would be inside the mansion. He looked at all this and sighed deeply. It was 10 o'clock at night. She had told him that this would be over by midnight, so the torture wouldn't last long. He looked at her before getting out. At least I have a good incentive to endure this for 2 hours, he thought. She looked at him, seeming to read his thoughts. She leaned in, gave him a very light kiss on the lips, so as not to smudge her lipstick, and simply asked, "Shall we?" He took a deep breath, opened the car door, and got out, circling around to open the door for her, helping her out. They walked in hand toward the mansion. Upon entering, the woman led him straight to a small improvised counter where a girl in a work uniform and an absolutely professional demeanor received his wife's coat, handing her a tag with a number for retrieval. Then she gave him a tag too. "I have nothing to leave here," he said, surprised. "All guests must have this number with them and return it upon exiting, whether they deposit something here or not," replied the girl in a completely impersonal tone. He shrugged, unsure what to make of this, but when in Rome, right? He slipped the tag into the pocket of his tuxedo and followed his wife, arm in arm. They entered the grand hall, as imposing as the rest of the house, with a pink marble floor and some Greek-style columns. The column supported an interior balcony accessed by one of the two curved side staircases that led to the rest of the house's first floor. Since they had never been there before, she made sure to explore all the corners of the house, at least the accessible ones, with curiosity. Everywhere there were furniture, paintings, and decorations that denoted their antiquity and history. After wandering around and appreciating the architecture and objects, they stepped outside to the back garden. He noticed that there were few interactions between men and women, with the women appearing to be separated into groups, talking among themselves, and the men also grouped together. But he didn't find it strange. She spotted a group of women talking near a fountain and immediately dragged him toward them. He knew one of them, but none of the others. When they saw her, all greeted her. "We can't believe you're here," one said. "We almost gave up on seeing you at one of these parties." He found this comment strange. In the end, how many times had she told him throughout the week that this was a unique opportunity, and that she had never been invited? Had she? Or was the woman referring to the fact that her friend had finally managed to get an invitation? There was something odd about that comment. Another thing he noticed was the looks of all of them toward him, not subtle at all. He looked at her with a questioning expression, but she seemed completely oblivious and continued talking about trivialities with them. Then she turned to him and in a condescending tone said, "Go get us some drinks." It wasn't a request, it was a statement, as if it was his obligation. He, taken by surprise, looked at her with narrowed eyes. She noticed and suddenly added, "Be a dear, go on," with a smile. He looked at her and then at the other women. This moment had left a bitter taste in his mouth, and he didn't even know why, but something didn't sit right. However, he decided to brush it off. Another hour and a half and this would be over, according to her. He shrugged, let go of her, and headed toward the bar. He waited some time for someone to notice him and ordered a glass of wine for her and another for himself. He didn't want to mix drinks. He still had to drive across the city. However, while waiting, he couldn't help but notice that almost everyone was looking at him and murmuring, with the women's gazes being more intense. As if they were all evaluating him. He felt uncomfortable. Do I have some stain on my clothes or something out of place? A quick inspection assured him that he didn't, even discreetly checking his fly to make sure it wasn't open, but no. He couldn't figure out why they were looking at him like that. Finally, with the drinks in hand, he returned to where his wife was, but didn't find her where he had left her. Damn it, he thought. Where did she disappear to? He wandered around the garden searching for her, sipping from his glass and holding hers in his hand. After searching in vain for 45 minutes, he put her glass down and sat down. Fuck, his brain shouted. So she knows I don't know anyone here and just disappears like this. Where did she go? He was starting to feel irritated. After the day he had, and despite his wife's promises, nothing seemed to be improving. He looked at his watch. It was just past 11. He continued to look around, trying to see her, but couldn't find her anywhere. His irritation grew with each passing minute, and he was reaching a point where his frustration, coupled with the exhaustion from the day, was beginning to turn him sour. If she was going to abandon him like this, he might as well have stayed home. He was lost in his thoughts when he felt a touch on his shoulder. He turned around and saw a guy in his 50s, good-looking, who approached him with a smile. You must be Alex, Marie's husband. Yes, that's me. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. He looked at the man, wondering why it was a pleasure. At that moment, even small talk was starting to annoy him and make him suspicious. Anthony Perry, at your service, the man said, extending his hand, which he shook. I'm the host of this party. Pleasure to meet you, he replied courteously. I must say, I've heard a lot about you. I hope it hasn't all been bad. On the contrary. We've only heard good things. And we all know you're a lucky man. We all envy you. How so? He asked, surprised. Well, man, don't be modest. Your wife is a stunner. There isn't a man here who hasn't coveted her for years. He was shocked by the remark. I'm not very comfortable with you talking about my wife like that, he said, irritation creeping into his voice. The man just laughed. Relax. In the end, we're all in this together, and there's not a woman here who isn't eager to be your lucky one today. Even my wife is itching. He fell silent, a black cloud beginning to form in his mind. Have you seen my wife, by any chance? Yes, I saw her. She's in the house. When you enter, turn left, follow the hallway, and you'll find her in the library. Thank you, he replied, standing up and heading toward the house. He followed the instructions and entered the library where he finally saw her talking carefree with other women. He approached her, and as soon as she saw him, she smiled, but the smile faded when she looked at him. He came close to her ear and murmured, "We need to talk." She looked at him with a questioning expression, and he added through clenched teeth, "Now." The tone and demeanor he had left no room for doubt. Her smile completely vanished, replaced by something else in her eyes, fear, panic. He couldn't identify it. The other women with her noticed that something was going on and fell silent as well. She stood up and followed him as they searched for a place where they could talk without interruptions. As they walked down the corridor, he spotted an open door to a room, and since it wasn't occupied, he grabbed her arm, almost pushing her inside, and entered, shutting the door behind him. He looked at her in silence, his expression serious and heavy. "What's going on, dear?" she asked with a cheeky smile and almost a mocking tone. "That's what I'm asking. Can you explain to me what's happening? What's supposed to happen? It's a party. Haven't you been having fun?" "No. You know I didn't even want to come, and you practically forced me. We arrive, and you disappear. Then I had a very interesting conversation with the host." He fell silent, letting his gaze rest on her. She, feeling uncomfortable, couldn't even look at him. So, I'll repeat the question, and this time I want a proper answer. Can you explain to me what's going on? Well, dear, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Nothing's going on. It's just a simple party, and we'll be leaving soon because it's almost over. You don't need to be like this. I promise you'll have a wonderful night. He kept looking at her for a long moment, the silence heightening the tension between them. Don't you want to say that we're going to have a wonderful night? Yes, dear. We're both definitely going to have a wonderful night. In that case, we might as well get ahead of things and leave now. Let's go. Not a chance, she suddenly protested. I've wanted to come to one of these parties for years, and you're not going to ruin my night. Yes, but from what I know, it wasn't for lack of invitation. Apparently, it was more for lack of company. Not that you ever talked to me about these parties until last week. The parties are for couples. Then why didn't you tell me before? She stopped and bit her lip, something she only did when she was immensely nervous. We had the kids at home, it was more complicated, and I knew you would never want to come if I mentioned them. And why wouldn't I want to come? She took a deep breath and answered, looking anywhere but at him. Because the drawing is about to start, and it's something I know you would never accept if I told you. Drawing? Yes, there's going to be a drawing soon. And as if taking the cue, a voice was heard loud through a sound system, announcing that the drawing would begin and that everyone should go to the main hall. Let's go. Now. It was not a request. I already told you to not even think about it, she replied, passing by him and opening the door, grabbing his hand and dragging him with her to the main hall. A man, clearly the master of ceremonies, was speaking into a microphone, urging the guests to gather in the hall. When it was confirmed that everyone was present, the man spoke again. Let's finally start our drawing for the night. He reached into a blue bag and pulled out a ball with a number on it. 28, he announced. One of the guests stepped forward, presenting his ticket to the master of ceremonies, who confirmed the number and then pulled a number from the pink bag, announcing it as well. A woman walked to the center of the room, approached the selected guest, gave him a soft kiss on the lips with a smile, and he took her by the arm, and they both marched out of the room, leaving the house and heading toward the street, to the applause of the others. So that's what the tickets are for? He asked his wife, shocked by what he was witnessing. Yes. He stood still and silent, with a serious expression that was impossible to read, as he watched the room grow emptier as the couple selected in the drawing exited. In his mind, he had already strangled his wife with his own hands and shot down everyone in that room. But on the outside, he appeared just like a statue. Until the master of ceremonies announced a number, and she told him, "It's my turn." He looked at her with eyes as cold as polar ice. "Don't do this." She looked at him, into his eyes, and realized he was really not okay, but they were calling for her to the middle of the room. "Soon your number will be called, you'll leave here with someone, you'll have a night with a different experience, and tomorrow you'll see, when we talk, that this will only bring us closer together." And without further words, she turned and walked toward the man who was already waiting for her. Like all the other couples, she kissed the lucky one on the lips, who then took her by the arm and led her out of the room. Although he seemed like a statue glued to the floor, he felt something inside his chest that he couldn't define. As if at that moment, someone had ripped his heart out and replaced it with a stone. He stopped seeing what was around him as the world turned white, his ears heard everything as if it was very far away, he felt the cold sweat invade his forehead, feeling he might faint or have a heart attack. Or maybe not that much, but he at least recognized the symptoms of a panic attack. He reached out, grabbing hold of a wall to avoid falling, and took a deep breath, trying to regain control over his emotions. And it was at that precise moment that, as he did so, he made a resolution, and as he got lost in the corridors of his mind, thinking of everything that lay ahead, he felt a touch on his shoulder and paid attention to another man who was addressing him. "What's your number?" Apparently, the master of ceremonies had announced a number, but no one had stepped forward. He pulled the ticket from his jacket pocket, and the man immediately told him, it's your turn, go. Almost pushing him to the center of the room, where he remained, continuing to be still and oblivious to his surroundings, lost in his mind. The master of ceremonies announced a number from the pink bag, and a woman approached him. Tall, slim, with an extremely elegant gait, naturally red hair that seemed to be on fire, loose and long down to the small of her back, very fair skin but covered in freckles that gave her a natural charm, wearing an even more revealing dress than his wife, yet with no hint of bad taste. She approached him with a smile that looked like a girl who had won the toy she wanted for Christmas. She reached him and stretched up since he didn't lower himself to her, giving him a gentle kiss on the lips, to which he didn't respond. Then she took his arm and pulled him, dragging him out of the house.